So welcome to today's event. We have a distinguished speaker and the audience size shows how distinguished he is. Let me introduce him, Dr. Madhusudhanan Kalaichelvan. He is an architecture graduate and a gold medalist in post graduation specialization in conservation and architectural research. His doctoral research focused on Thiruvannamalai temple town planning. With over 14 years in academics, he has mentored students across leading architecture schools. A committed heritage enthusiast, he has received multiple accolades for his contributions. He teaches Shaiva Siddhantam at Dharmapura Madinam and was conferred the title Shaiva Siddhanta Ratnakaram in May 2024. He is among the youngest to receive the titles Adina Pulavar in 2023 and Saiva Tamil Arinyar in 2022 from the 27th Pontiff of Sri Dharmapura Madinam. His other recognitions include the Professor Swaminathan Award in 2020, Ilakya Chemmal in 2019, and the Vedavalli Memorial Award in 2018. An expert in art, architecture, heritage, and vernacular practices, he is a sought-after speaker on culture, religion, temple traditions, and literature. He served on the State Heritage Committee 2018 to 2022 and as a member of the Academic Council of Tamil Nadu, Dr. J. Jayalalitha Music and Fine Arts University. Through his initiative Radham is road access to temples, heritage, and monuments. He curates heritage tours. He writes on epigraphy, conservation, and archaeology, and has authored books in Tamil and English on temple traditions and architecture. I present before you Dr. Madhusudhanan Kalaichelvan, and he will, of course, talk about the topic himself, so I will not take much more time on that. In the meantime, I hope our technical glitches are overcome.
Very good evening to all. Happy to be here. And as he pointed out, I think it's probably the topic than the speaker that has invited the crowd. The topic as such is very sought after. It is something that has created a lot of ripples around the country, varying diameters across years. And Indus Valley has been a source of inspiration for learning history for many of us. Probably the sign that you've reached middle school is when you start using words like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. And this huge, long-last city, which is hailed for its tremendous town planning, the urban settlement that it was, which has been the topic of discussion for archaeologists, especially in the 20th century, starting from around the first quarter of the 20th century, and that which has been taken up for study by many for their own interests, many for vested interest, either ways. But Indus Valley has been this very curious topic for some of us. And to justify the title, as it is known as Indus Valley, very, very popularly, do we really even call it a valley civilization? That by itself is still a discussion, because it has been given the name and it has been discussed by the same name ever since somebody spotted the site that way and understood it and wanted to call it by that name. There are very senior scholars, very serious scholars, who still feel the phases in which Indus has evolved or the settlement there has evolved, at some point it shouldn't be technically called a valley civilization because it has moved far away. Even worse is, just in case to try similar to it, calling something as Vaigai Valley civilization. அந்த அளவுக்கு தான் இதுவுமே இருக்கு. So Indus has evolved in phases, and so just calling it as a river-based civilization will be of some justification, because as you move farther west from wherever it had happened, the valley part of it kind of gets distorted, and then you have it on the plains also. The site, which can be called an Indus Valley site, is just sprinkled all over. The maps, which shows the location of the sites and where it had happened, had been varying over years. And the density of the dots there has only been increasing over years as the maps have been published. But the title here calls it as Sindhu, that's of course Indus. And then you have Saraswati, which has created more controversy, more topic of discussion, which has invited a lot of discussions, in fact. Why are some of us very particular about introducing this word Saraswati here? Why should it not just be Indus? And more importantly, why a few scholars get jittery when the word Saraswati gets accompanied with Indus, and why should Saraswati be a topic of controversy? We'll see that also. And then you have the Tamil culture. So today's presentation will involve introducing the Sindhu Saraswathi Civilization, which will also have the justification for the name. And then we will get introduced to the Tamil Nadu based Keeladi excavation and why it became the archaeological crush for many of us after 2015. And then let's see the commonalities. Further down, probably the differences. A couple of very serious issues which has been discussed in the recent past, especially post 2022-23, the discovery of the iron dagger and discovery of iron as such, and how very casually the timeline has been shifted and thousands of years being just added like that. And finally, let's come to some conclusions. Exploring the Sindhu Saraswati civilization, a quick timeline. It is almost now 2 centuries when Indus sites, by not probably by its name, but something becoming a spot for intrigued interest of archaeologists has happened. A quick timeline of some key events as it had happened involves Alexander Cunningham, the name that is so close with anything archaeological in India. He was almost the founder of ASI. So this gentleman has traveled all parts of India so extensively, interest driven purely, and with whatever theory was available then, he starts applying them over archaeological finds and comes up with the notes there. So his sneak peek of Indus Valley happens sometime around the 1853, if I'm right. So sometime around 1853, he discovers this and then hands it over to his fellow archaeologists, and then it kind of goes. Cunningham's first discovery was in fact a seal. Before the trenches being brought in there or the residences being cleared and exposed, it was just a collection of seals, which very clearly seemed very, very different for him. So this gentleman started showing a lot of interest in it, and slowly this thing about the Asiatic Society coming in and the Bombay-based archaeologists coming in, and so for the next 30, 40 years, everybody who had access had some interest towards Indus, went there, and probably sometime there you had a couple of breakthroughs before the 20th century, which includes many seals with animals being discovered. So till the 20th century, it was a long forgotten site, a huge urban settlement with seals and terracotta pottery strewn around. The roadways, and this was even before the road networks and the sewage canals and all that, those were even discovered. So it was just a deserted huge place. What was interesting about this was you don't see a city of that kind happening in India elsewhere. Or at a very, very broad perspective, they were not able to find a similar settlement somewhere in India as efficient as this happening then. So this kept it kind of very different, and the basic seeds of considering it to be foreign is sown in there. So the immediate pulse reaction there was to think that this is different from whatever India is today, so this is something foreign. With India, that happening in the borderline, which kind of separates India and Pakistan, even before all this partition thing came in, the rendu different culture madrinu paakradhu probably had started sometime there, and they from the early days, let's give them the benefit of doubt, not that they had any intentions to begin with, but they started looking it as foreign. And then you have Dayaram Sahni's breakthrough at Harappa, where he discovered more finished potteries, the drainage system, and more interestingly, he writes about how the drainage system was still functioning. He actually poured pots of water to see from the residential unit how it gets collected to the streetways, and at the junctions of the streets, this water kind of gets flowed, and then it gets collected, and the bricks used for to absorb water in bathrooms, and the material science comes in there. So his was a breakthrough. In fact, all that we talk about the drainage system, we owe it to this gentleman. Then you have more on it, where the Great Bath and the more of the seals were all discovered in Mohenjo-daro. That happens around 1920. Then this became the must visit for anybody interested in archaeology, and around 1924 was when John Marshall comes in. Till then, for almost 60 odd years, the repeated visits by many archaeologists and the interest that their writings created emphasized on this fact that this is something very new, unlike anything else that you see in India. So the beginning of Indus, even before the title card comes in, the very basic thought is that this is foreign. And right there, I personally feel this commotion of difference comes in. And John Marshall, with whatever material was accessible to him back then, and I'm talking about times when satellite images were not there, geosensing or other technologies were not being applied, it was mere visual data that they had. But the archaeologist that he was, who talks with material facts and material remains, which is what basic archaeology is, he considered this to be different from whatever was there in major parts of north of India, and goes on to call it as an example of Dravidian culture. Because the onset of translation of Vedas have all happened before then. We had Max Muller, who had assigned the date for Vedas. The Rig Veda descriptions have been a source of a good read for the Englishmen especially, and all that it describes there seems to be very different from the huge urban settlement that Indus was. It talks about pastures, it talks about agriculture, but not about huge fortified towns at least. So this basic difference in what the Vedic scriptures talk and what was visibly available in Harappa, Mohenjo-daro and other settlements there around made them think that these were two completely different, distinct civilizations, and hence John Marshall made the statement that this is probably the Dravidian settlement, a Dravidian culture. This probably is where the Dravidian civilization comes from. And this was a statement till a couple of years back. And when the thoughts about Keeladi and other things didn't happen, this was yet another statement that was being just spoken about, discussed, and debated. But after Keeladi, this has been picked up as the most important statement and celebrating the 100th year for it, surpassing even the discovery of Indus as such. To call that this was the moment, a milestone moment for somebody like John Marshall to say that this is what it is. But we should also take into consideration the data that was available in place, the theory which spoke about invasions, the theories which spoke about migrations, which were not really debunked then. And as a country, that was the times when archaeology was not a serious area of discussion or interest for many of us in general. It was a very sophisticated field, and people who saw something interesting in it were the ones who took it. We had to then wait till post-independence when it became a serious subject of interest to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and a lot of investments on Indus was made, and a lot of excavations did happen, and that is exactly where you have the entry of B.B. Lal, Brajbhushan Lal, who was an Indian archaeologist, a very Indian archaeologist, who had some working knowledge of Indian scriptures, pan-Indian traditions, rituals, urban scapes, sacred sites, generally a well-groomed Indian archaeologist with some Indianness in him. So his discovery had a tangentially opposite view. Probably he was the first to bring in this Indus to be a probable settlement from the Vedic period, because generally the timeline we had then was Indus followed by the Vedic period, and this timeline positioning was by and large influenced by Max Muller's translations of the Vedas and the time period that he has given. They have this tendency to fix this 4,500 years for the oldest of anything available, and anything which is better than that is slightly above it, or you fix it before it. So this is the index. The 3,000 to 4,500 years is the index that they have. Since the Vedas did surpass most of the literature that they were aware of, he gave it a 5,000 year timeline, and that kind of kept continuing. So if the Vedas were 5,000 years and this is slightly above it, because this is slightly more cultural, this is a more complicated setup. So let's put it like, say, 6,000 years from now. So it was not based on any scientific evidences, it was not based on any actual archaeological technologies being applied, but purely visual data and a scale of comparison. We know this, we have this has been assigned this date, this seems slightly older than this, so let's give this another 500 or plus years. This is exactly how the timeline was made available till even the 1970s, when remote sensing as a technology, satellite images especially, starts coming into picture. And B.P. Lal was very particular about identifying the seals with Vedic traditions. In fact, some of the seals, very popular seals, not the animal seals, but other seals that has, a people tree being worshipped or other such seals became an area of interest for him. And he started describing them based on Vedic scriptures. Now, that was taken by many, opposed by many, so the discussions kind of gotten a little more heated up. And from then, looking at Indus Valley with two different axes. One, and until then even the invasion theory has not been debunked. So that was also there. So the probable reasons for the failure of Indus Valley, the first probable reasons always was an invasion from somewhere, probably from the west, an invasion from the west. And so these reasons had a probable drought or the shift of the course of river as the last point, in fact. In fact, it was during the times of B.P. Lal, he identified drying up of this river and a probable migration. Not exactly him, but based on his research, a few did consider a natural calamity, a drought caused by either the shift of the river, the flow of the river, or drying up of the river beds. If that is the case, in close proximity, you have the 5 rivers, you have Indus, part of it still alive. So, what is this river which has dried up so much that people had to either shift or abandon it and move away from it? That is exactly where the reference to Saraswati is applied for the first time. A probable river which is more so nourishing this settlement has been forgotten, has changed track, has been left like that, and probably this natural calamity caused the transition or the migration from there. So when this was put out sometime around the 1960s or 70s, it needed more of technological data, technically sound data to support it, and that is where the remote sensing images comes into picture. And we're talking about Indus Valley, which is like a little more than a couple of hundreds of hectares in land. And it is definitely going to keep expanding in all possible directions, no limit to it. It needs furthermore studies, in fact, even after almost 150 odd years of after discovery, it needs more study, it definitely needs more resources, more people to come in and take it over. And we're talking about this civilization where you have the writing which is yet to be deciphered. And this is one very popular topic by people into coding and people who are generally involved with linguistics and trying to translate it to decipher it, to break it. Even the pictographs and heliographs have all been conveniently sorted out, but Indus signs, the sign language there, is still not convincingly sorted. A lot of people have their own versions to it, but when it comes to global discussions, it does fail. So that's still one very significant area. Writing as such, which is available in plenty, but what can be considered as sign language has not yet been deciphered. So with what has been written on the seals not being discovered, we can certainly not come to any possible final conclusions. With that in mind, let's start with it. So the Sindhu Saraswathi Civilization, around 1860s, Jonathan Mark, he comes into picture, and that is when the organization called HARP, Harappa Archaeological Research Project, is set in. A lot of money flows in, and that is when biodata, craft objects, the terracotta figures were all put together, broken potsherds were all joined together, and majority of what you see in Delhi National Museum is from this period, from around the 1980s, when a lot of money flowing in, they were able to fix these broken potsherds and give it some kind of a form. And that is another major turnover. And then you have Ascoparpolos script thing that comes in around 1990s. That is one more topic which is discussed probably after John Marshall. This is being discussed. So he says he has deciphered the Indus script, and he says it is a Proto-Dravidian script. The second occurrence of the word Dravidian, to call this as a Dravidian culture, happens around the 1990s. Probably after John Marshall, it was this gentleman who says this is a Dravidian script. And a couple of thumb rules that he applied were that a fish is generally represented like a star in Indus. And he says, in the mean, fish in a mean இல்லையா, அவர் சொல்றது என்னன்னா விண்மீனையும் மீன் சொல்றாங்க. விண்மீன் is star. And it is a star. In Tamil, விண்மீன் சொன்னா ஸ்டார், அது ஒரு மீன் தான். அது வானத்தை கடல் மாதிரி பார்க்குறோம். எப்படி கடல்ல மீன் நீந்துதோ அந்த மாதிரி வானமாகிற கடல்ல நட்சத்திரங்கள் மீன் மாதிரி இருக்கு. அதனால இந்த விண்மீன் தான் இவங்க காமிச்சிருக்காங்க. ஸோ இட் ஹேஸ் அ திராவிடியன் பேஸ் டு இட். இப்படி ஆரம்பிச்சு அந்த சைன் பிக்டோரியலாக இருக்கிற அந்த ஸ்கிரிப்டை ஒன்றுன்னா ஹி ஸ்டார்ட்ஸ் டிசெஃபரிங். And this is the second pump of Dravidian tradition into the Indus site study. Then you have Michael Danilo, who introduces Saraswati with a scientific background to it, with the photographs from the satellites playing a major role in it. And Indus sites, very many new sites, hundreds of them being discovered in the last 40, 50 years. And it kind of gets extended far away from Indus. So much that Indus cannot be the water unit for those groups of villages anymore. It has moved so far. அதுலேருந்து அவ்வளோ தள்ளி போயிட்டதுனால யூ கேன் ஸ்டில் நாட் ஃபீல் தட் இண்டஸ் வாஸ் தி சோர்ஸ் ஆஃப் வாட்டர் ஃபார் திஸ் சிவிலைசேஷன் சொல்லவே முடியாது. அண்ட் இட் இஸ் ஆல்வேஸ் வாட்டர் தட் கம்ஸ் பிரைமரி வென் யூ டாக் அபவுட் அ சிவிலைசேஷன். அது இங்கே ட்ரெடிஷ்னல் டவுன் பிளானிங்லேயே ஆகட்டும், அர்பன் பிளானிங்லேயே ஆகட்டும், பெரினியல் சோர்ஸ் ஆஃப் வாட்டர் இஸ் வாட் இஸ் first in the checklist of when you look out for வீடு ரெண்டுக்கு போனாலே அதுதானே ஃபர்ஸ்ட் பார்க்குறோம். ஸோ ஃபார் a huge settlement to be designed and built, perennial source of water is what is looked for. ஸோ இங்கே இண்டஸ்லேருந்து இது ரொம்ப தள்ளி போயிடுது. அதனால this cannot be the source of water anymore-னு ஒரு டிஸ்கஷன் கொண்டு வந்துட்டு, அப்போ what is this is going to be the perennial source of water. That is where Saraswati comes in. And this as a river has been celebrated in the Vedas. It is celebrated as a river only. She is called as a Nadi, and her flow is described like many rivers that starts from the Himalayan glaciers. She also runs close to 1,800 kilometers before she reaches the oceans. And en route, she has created a lot of valleys. She has been she's distributed herself into minor rivers, streams, and she's been the source of. People are thankful in the Vedic scriptures to this river called Saraswati. Time and again, close to 70 odd references to Saraswati as a river. The floods in Saraswati is discussed. That she is voluminous, that she is really wide. All of those are described with beautiful metaphors, in fact, like any other rivers. Interestingly, in the triplet, Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, happens right there in the Vedas, and as a civilization, as a cultural idiom, it's still followed till date. Ganga, Yamuna, sonale come about to Saraswati is there always. So this couldn't have just been an imagination. So this river, which had probably flown there, which is still available as a track. And either to substantiate this claim, Michael Danino goes a step ahead and he talks about how Akbar had a reference. The Akbarnama has a reference about how his troops, his army, when they go on their long expeditions, especially crossing today's Pakistan and Afghanistan, en route they follow a particular track of a dried riverbed, which is so still very virile that 6 or 7 feet of digging there fetches you very clean water. So he uses such significant claims, in fact, to substantiate for a fact that a river has been flowing there, and the direction is this. Interestingly, around 1890s, if I'm right, a cartographer who's working on the mapping of this region, he goes around mapping it. ஆனால் பேரெல்லாம் எழுதும்போது அந்த மலைக்கு அந்த 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 செட்டில்மெண்ட்டுக்கு அந்த சின்ன நதிக்கு குளத்துக்கு பேரெல்லாம் எழுதும்போது he engages with the local public and takes data from them, because that's what is being called by, right? So அந்த இடத்துக்கு என்ன பேர், இந்த மலைக்கு என்ன பேருலாம் கேட்கும்போது, there is one stream which is remembered as Saraswati. We should not in fact be cursing Danino. If anybody, this cartographer back in the 1890s has mentioned a small stream called Saraswati which runs close to today's Haryana. These are all very important points to say that people there who are still living, the true beneficiaries of that part of India or little outside India today, have been remembering Saraswati as a water body. She has been there lifeful, and hence the story of how she becomes the third in the line, the three sisters, Ganga, Yamuna and Saraswati. So we cannot completely rub off and say that Saraswati never existed, and if anything, it's completely imagination, and that she has got nothing to do with Indus-ங்கிறத நம்மளால சொல்லவே முடியாது. Then after Saraswati coming in, you have John Mackintosh, who comes in, and he calls it as a peaceful realm, because there had not been any signs of warfare whatsoever in Indus. Not plenty of ammunitions or arms have been discovered. Of course, they are there, but for any settlement you'll need it. But to call it, in fact, he goes ahead and calls it as a peaceful realm. Unlike other settlements where you have sharp tools and spears and other things across the world, நிறைய இருக்கும் அதெல்லாம். இங்கேயே தமிழ்நாட்டிலே we have, talking about when ancient settlements like the Neolithic settlements, a Neolithic settlementல ஒரு standard image for a Neolithic settlement, even today those settlements have evolved into small scale villagesனா, you'll have this village citadel, ஒரு சின்ன platform இருக்கும், you'll have hundreds of stone tools kept there that will be worshipped. So from then they have been worshipping it. So those are sharp tools and they are still worshipping it. So இந்த மாதிரி ammunitions இதெல்லாம் இல்லாததுனால Mackintosh went ahead and called it as a very peaceful realm, and he says this society as such is very egalitarian, and that there doesn't seem to be a sign of war. And that is where the invasion theory by a supposed group from the west was kind of forgotten. இப்போ அதை பற்றி ரொம்ப யாரும் பேசுறதில்ல, அகாடமிக்கலாக யாரும் பேசுறதில்ல, because it has been very well debunked and sealed off. Then around 2014, a very significant change happens with Sri Airavata Mahadevan coming in, but he's been involved with it for like 40-50 years. But 2014, he comes with this giant claim that he has deciphered the script, and in fact points up to a couple of seals and says, in the pictographic arrangement, that this is how I read it. And he starts claiming a discovery or deciphering of the meaning, and he says, but this hasn't got this is not a prototype. You cannot use this as a syntax. You will have to sit and reveal each of the seal with these principles. Now, a language technically cannot be that way. There should be some kind of a format that it follows. There should be some kind of a similarity with it. Enough, if each seal has got to be deciphered at a different level, you need to keep formulating a separate template for each of the seal. So this thing about this is being debunked now, because he says he also talks about the wind mean எப்படி அங்க மீனா காமிச்சிருக்காங்களோ நட்சத்திரம் மீன் இந்த மாதிரியே தமிழ் ஒரு பேஸா வச்சுக்கிட்டு he goes around deciphering the script. But where what he said is not taken seriously is when he says that each of the seal has got to be studied for its individual value and ஒன்னொன்னுத்தையும் இப்படி பண்ணணும். So then that became a kind of a game for people to just assume, and all serious groups on social media, especially that discusses Indus very seriously, started taking it at a very lighter vein, and a lot of people started playing. Today evening's time will be this seal has been put, come let's all get together and start deciphering it. Each of it gave very different interpretation to it, and it was just moving that way. So we have to accept that deciphering of the Indus script technically has not yet happened. It has not yet happened. In fact, there are few very serious scholars who still would love to believe that Indus scripts it is not even anything to be considered as a written material. ஏதோ ஒரு சைன் ஒரு சிம்பிள் அந்த சீல் அங்கே கொஞ்சம் இடம் இருந்தது, அவங்க எதையோ பஞ்ச் பண்ணிட்டு போயிருக்காங்கிற அளவுக்கெல்லாம் அதை டிஸ்கஸ் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. So we'll have to accept for a fact that it is not yet been deciphered, so it is still there. If there is anything that can sort out this Indus conundrum, it should be the script, the deciphering of the script. But how long is that going to take? Who's going to do it? We'll have to wait for that. And Rakhigarhi discovery with the bones therein in 2018 was probably the next milestone. And the chariot that was discovered, and talking about chariot, bones of horses have not yet been discovered. Officially, nothing to do with horses in Indus has been brought out at all. Whatever was probably discovered by B.B. Lal and taken for tests and other things have been much later, with closer inquiry over it, has been probably considered to be, been considered probably bones of asses or donkeys or whatever. So the horses nu solradhukku vali illanu close panniyachu. Then the chariot, of course, was a major difference, and the skeleton of somebody with South Asian ancestry discovered there at Rakhigarhi was probably the next important, significant find. And then 2021, Dholavira becomes this UNESCO World Heritage Site. And the report submitted for it is thoroughly impressive. If anybody is interested, it's available online. I would highly recommend it. Every time a monument is submitted for a UNESCO status, you will have to give a report to it, and a very concise report, in fact, with all the requirements and the checklist, all of it should be filled. And அது ரொம்ப அழகாக அந்த ரிப்போர்ட்டை ப்ரிப்பேர் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. And Dholavira definitely is worthy of getting it. And then 2023, 17லேருந்து ஆரம்பிச்சாச்சு, but 23ல it reached its max, with Indus being very casually equated with Keeladi. So these are some of the milestone events over years. So what we'll have to keep in mind is Indus script has not been deciphered at all so far convincingly. Indus is extremely huge, and we are still in the process of crossing, say, 1/3 of what was Indus. The presence of another river which was active then, which has been dried up or forgotten or moved because of tectonic shift, either ways, that which has disappeared from the face of earth has got to be considered as we move forward in anything to do with Indus. So these are some of the assumptions. Now we all know the positioning of the sites, where they are predominantly in today's Pakistan, some of them in today's Rajasthan and Kutch and Gujarat regions. But in the diameter ஜாஸ்தி ஆகிட்டே போய் மகாராஷ்டிரா வரைக்கும்லாம் வந்தாச்சு. Though they are not very happy to announce it as Indus, sites which are equally old, styled in the similar way, have flown all the way into Maharashtra. If you will have to think about Keeladi belonging to the same genre, probably we'll have to bridge this distance between Maharashtra to Tamil Nadu with more sites, and also take the pains of discovering more of Keeladi to see what else is remaining there. So Yeah, it's the 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE is kind of an average. Give it like 1,000 years this way, that way, because a lot of changes are there. I've just picked this central theme number மாதிரி ஒன்று எடுத்திருக்கேன். You can easily give one more millennium this way or that way. And area is close to 30,000 to 1 lakh square kilometers, 4 or 5,000 hectares. But அதுக்கும் மேலேயே தான் போயிட்டு இருக்கு. It is the upper limit can still expand more. That's how huge it is. But with given the constraints of reaching out to the sites or seeing what it is and accessibility to it, it is definitely being slowed down. But we definitely need a lot of international influence to take it more seriously and study it. You can see the concentration of the sites. The previous slide has hardly 8 or 10 sites, but those are probably the first stage, and a lot of discovery have happened there. But அதை தாண்டி இப்போ in the last 50-60 years, that's the number of sites that it has paved way to be called as Indus site. Some of the most significant finds there, I think middle school history, we all know Indus Valley is popular for its gridiron pattern road, the Great Bath, the drainage system, the housing pattern, spatial planning inside a house, material science, all of it. The reason for decline, drying up of, see, all along we've been thinking that probably Indus disappeared or got vanished because of a supposed invasion, the AIT as it called, the Aryan invasion theory, which has not been spoken about in the recent past because it's been debunked enough at academic platforms. Other platforms I'm not commenting, but academic platforms, yes, people are not very particular about it. They're not buying it anymore. That pushed aside. The second probable reason was an epidemic. If that is the case, bone remains, skeletal remains aren't available in plenty. Then we'll have to think about a natural calamity, a flood probably, or drying up of the riverbed, or the sudden shift. And it wouldn't have definitely happened overnight. It should have spanned across a couple of centuries for people to feel that this is not going to be of any use to them anymore, and then slowly they start migrating. So at some point, Indus had come to a stop. From then, people have started migrating. And this migration couldn't have happened in one long national highway. It should have spread across in many directions. If anything, to call Indus civilization the roots for many traditions that we call as Indian today is pretty much valid, because people have carried their memories, traditions, language, the belief system and more from here, and should have spread across India. Because apart from the differences, which are of course apparent, the similarities are something that we seldom talk about. And these similarities, if you try stringing them together and want to look back and take it back in time, probably Indus was this one cradle from where many of these beliefs that we have today as casual practices should have started and spread across India. Why am I particular about calling it as Sindhu Saraswati? I just gave you this timeline from when on Saraswati came into picture and how it is understood as the river that is praised in the Rig Veda especially. And Danny knows highlights of its prominence when it comes to discussing Indus Valley. So that is one very serious point that we'll have to consider, because every time we talk about Saraswati, the immediate point is it does not exist. Have you really checked upon it? No, I don't know that, but it does not exist. That is how it happens. In fact, in the last 1 week, ever since the poster was out, I did get a lot of phone calls and asking me as to why Saraswati. I said, it is because Saraswati is. And if anything, this civilization, to praise Saraswati as the life giver from the scriptures, and to call the community of people from there as Saraswats, has all been there as a tradition. And how can there be a case where a never existed river is praised so much in a text as a river as such? Because some scholars have been popularizing an opinion that the Saraswati reference happens in the Vedas, but not as a river, as a goddess herself. No, not the case. Goddess don't flow around. Goddess don't flood. Goddess don't move mountains or boulders. This particular character called Saraswati has been described to flow long distances, somebody who's born in the mountains, finding her way to the oceans, and en route flourishing and nourishing the people all her way. That's how she's being described. So no doubt at all it is a river, but where did this go? If it never existed, why is there so much of reference to her? Especially the 4 rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati and Satluj, Shadajadri as she is called. So those 4 rivers are time and again celebrated in the scriptures. So while all the other three are real, actual river that flows with water, why should Saraswati alone be a myth? Why should they be so particular about praising a mythological, never existed river? So we will have to take Saraswati in our consideration. And so it cannot be an Indus-centric civilization as such. So with Indus at one level and Saraswati at the other end, whatever happened in between can probably called as Indus Saraswati civilization. So very particular about bringing in this word Saraswati because there are enough reasons to say that this particular region flourished with its civilization because this river did exist. Faith in Sindhu Saraswati. We also have this theory about how certain Vedic practices, especially fire sacrifices, fire altars, have been there in Indus settlement as such. And the most popular and often quoted example is that of Kalibangan. This one find by B.P. Lal is this fire altar that which he claims has very specific location of the fire sacrifice pits with a well nearby, and in the planning of this yagashala, if I can call it so, has been exactly picked from the prescribed sections of the Vedas. Brahmanas, which where there are certain references to the directions in which each of the fire sacrifice pit has got to be designed, and this is not just one pit, there are seven, one next to another, and there is a well, and apparently the prescribed traditions, the ritual protocol demands that you have a mortar in one corner where you can grind certain creepers, the juice from which is extracted and offered very pure. And there should be another secondary fire space where ghee is being melted. And in the Madhuriyana prescriptions, Ellathium he kind of overlaps it with what is available there in that site, and goes ahead and declares that this is exactly this is exactly the yagasala where the particular yajnas as prescribed here has been conducted because each yaga needs a different scheme there. The yagasala is very different. The plan of the yaga kundam is very different. Some are semicircular, some are circular, some are octagon, some are squares. These cannot be kitchen hobs for sure, because one next to another without a space to carry any utensils on them. And given the size of the fire pit there, you need to really keep huge crockery if you're going to cook with that as a hob. But there is not even space for such huge crockery kept one next to another. Idellathiyum sollitu dhaan அவர் argue பண்றார். Because it is a fire pit, so it need not necessarily mean that it is for cooking. This is a yagasalaங்கிறத இதெல்லாம் வச்சு தான் அவர் ப்ரூவ் பண்றார். So you can see the walls around there and a dwarf wall, which is very typical of yagasalas today. There will always be a dwarf wall around it, and then you have the fire pits right at the geometric center, and oru corner there is a small well, and one corner has a mortar, a provision for a mortar where you can grind and extract the essence of those creepers that are described. So this is a typical yagasala in Sullivar he brings in. So evidences of ritual practices, this is a very, very important point to keep in mind, that ritual practices did exist. Now, Keeladi start panni to call it as a secular society, not a secular society exactly, but more like an atheistic society. Slightly that has gotten extended with whatever audacity to say that the entire Indus was atheist too. So belief, in fact, across the globe, to call a civilization to be entirely non-believers cannot even be the case. Very senior anthropologists, when you have to declare something as a civilization, one of the primary requisites there, the prerequisites there includes some kind of an expression of belief system in place. It might be, it needn't be complicated temple structures, it need not have a priest there or a huge god's image there. That's not even needed. Even an worship of ancestors, the way you deal with the dead ones, if you're going to have the practice of revoking the spirits and striking a conversation with them, simple fire altars at the center, which is worshipped for whatever reasons. And settlements, we have references again, even in Sangam literature, which talks about the headman of a settlement is bound by the duty of protecting a fire pit which is lit in his kitchen, like forever. That's one of his duties. நெருப்பை பாதுகாக்கணும் அப்படின்னே சொல்லுவாங்க. So he will have to keep it always burning. And that was a tradition where if the hob at your home burns off, நீங்கள் போயிட்டு அங்கேருந்து நெருப்பை கடன் வாங்கிட்டு வருவாங்க. நெருப்பு கடன் வாங்குறதுனே ஒரு ட்ரெடிஷன் இருந்தது. Because lighting a fire was so much a ritual that you cannot imagine putting it off in the night and then using your lighter to switch it on the next day morning. That's not how it happens. Not just the Agnihotris, everybody, any family, if the moment you get married, the fire from the fire altar is carried along to your residence and you lit it and you will have to keep it burning like always. Even in the night times, at least ஒரு சின்ன தணல் அதில் எரிஞ்சிட்டு இருக்கும். The next day morning நெருப்பு கூட்டுறதுன்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. So the senior women there will have to come and அதில் அந்த காத்தெல்லாம் ஊதி அதை திருப்பி கொண்டு வருவாங்க. The tradition still at temples prescribed by the agamas demand that even the lamp lit in the Garbhagraham, the fire goes from the Madapalli. So the temple kitchen will have to keep that fire. So installing a fire and keeping it burning is a tradition which is there as a common feature in many cultures, starting from tribal cultures to very sophisticated urban culture. So இது இப்படியே தான் கண்டினியூ ஆகிட்டு வருது. அந்த விதத்தில் to safeguard fire and to protect it and whatever you need to do, that has always been a case. The Vedic traditions, again, we owe a lot to Gregory Poshel, who took it upon himself to study a lot of aspects, including directions, dimensions, spatial planning. Idallathai vechikittu he started discussing a lot about the Vedic traditions being rooted at Indus Valley. And some of his writings are available. He is no more. He was a faculty in University of Pennsylvania. 2011-12 he passed away. But his writings are all thankfully documented and kept well. If you're looking forward for reading, I would recommend this gentleman's papers. All of it are all published. So he brings up this topic of Indus being a very sophisticated settlement, not like a random a village-based settlement or a small settlement. It is huge. It has towns, it has ports, it has trade and commerce, it has the advancement in fields like metallurgy. I mean, talking about a port with which they traded with Mesopotamia back then. Yeah, ships being built to sail across the oceans, having seals, half of which is retained by the person who's importing and the other half is with the exporter to cross-check and accept the goods. I'm sure they should have had huge godowns to keep their goods and whatnot. It was a very functioning and a happening settlement. Now, if you really have to compare this with Tamil Nadu's culture, maybe we can go somewhere close by. But to reduce it to the level of Keeladi and say that Keeladi is an extension of Indus, or sometimes go one step ahead and say this is the prototype from which Indus evolved. Because the migration, whether it's north to south or south to north, is still being discussed. I mean, கொஞ்ச நேரத்தில் நமக்கு அது கொஞ்சம் ஃபன்னியாக கூட இருக்கும் சில நேரத்தில். But I tell you, very seriously people discuss about the migration, whether it happened from north to south or south to north. There are some very serious people who believe the Keeladi people actually took all the culture and got Indus established. That is still there. So this gentleman takes it upon himself to study aspects like burial pits, the orientation of skeletons, the ritual vessels that gets buried along with, the size of it, the dimensions of it, the depth of it. இந்த மாதிரி ரொம்ப சின்ன nuances-லாம் எடுத்து he starts studying and says that this seems to be running parallel to what are prescribed in the Vedas. Now, I should tell you that is not good enough proof for us to believe that the entire Indus was a Vedic culture. We cannot go to that extent also because we'll have to wait for more findings. Certain aspects described in the Vedas seem to have been followed here. Probably it was in practice here. It had its own influence. But to say that the entire culture was Vedic in nature needs more material evidence. So it would be as much as, with whatever is available in Keeladi to say that this is Indus and continuation of Indus, அதே மாதிரி தான் இருக்கும் இந்த எக்ஸ்ட்ரீமுக்கு போனாலும். So, but we cannot definitely brush off the connects that Indus settlement seems to pose with its Vedic roots. Then on faith and Vedic links, a lot have happened. So I've just given the names of scholars who have worked on it. You can make a note of it and read more papers of theirs. To call this as a proto-religious system, because you don't have huge temples, you don't have images of gods as such, but you cannot brush off aspects like a set of terracotta figurines which poses with a different fashion of Namaskara Mudra. And some scholars have arranged it and called it as almost 7 or 8 asanas in the 12 asanas of Surya Namaskaram that we have. One particular terracotta image interests me. I mean, it's like somebody who's their காலை இப்படி நீட்டிட்டு இப்படி நமஸ்காரம் பண்ணுற மாதிரி உட்காந்துட்டு இருக்கிறது, அண்ட் ஒரு காலை மடக்கிட்டு கையை மேலே தூக்கி வச்சிருக்கிறது. And the very simple Namaskara Mudra is there in many terracottas. So, these little traditions of Surya Namaskaram or other aspects have all been discussed too. But nothing is good enough to say that it was a temple-based settlement or a full-fledged religious settlement as you could probably, or calling it as a Vedic settlement as such, cannot be the case. Because there is a lot of faith-based aspects that are available, material evidences, but to say that it was a Vedic settlement needs more. Now coming to Keeladi, discovering Keeladi, general norms of taking up any excavation needs a detailed study of what we call as salvage archaeology. So generally this is done by students of master's degree students in history, archaeology. I mean, randomly சில இடங்களுக்கெல்லாம் போய் பார்ப்பாங்க. Keeladi is one such site where 2015-16 when all of this started, a mere walk of 100 meters on the ground, you will be chancing upon several potsherds from the Sangam period. That happens very casually, in fact. We in fact collect a lot and give it as souvenirs. But in அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு salvage level, what is the value of this site? How potent is this for a detailed archaeological excavation? இது ஒரு list பண்ணுவாங்க. அந்த விதத்தில் Vaigai was considered very seriously for archaeological excavation. One, it is an ancient settlement, no doubt about it. Secondly, Vaigai, like Kaveri or Tamarbarni, still has not been taken up seriously. So a bunch of students who were interested in exploring Vaigai made a lot of, made long walks on the banks and discovered many sites, and it was all mapped. Then the possibility of hiring that site, acquiring that site for an excavation is discussed. Adila shortlist pannadula Keeladi was one of those sites. So if you can still buy 100 more acres and start excavating, you're sure to find more good, interesting, chancing upon interesting remnants. So this particular site was our agricultural field, a coconut grove, which was Pesi, Vangi excavation started. And what has been discovered so far in Keeladi? Yes, it's near Madurai. In fact, district, I think Shivaganga district. And the lifeline there is the Vaigai river. But one thing that we should all not forget is தமிழ்நாடுல கீழடியை விட ரொம்ப வெல்த்தியான ஃபைண்ட்ஸ் அண்ட் வெரி சிக்னிஃபிகண்ட் ஃபைண்ட்ஸோட வந்த எக்ஸ்கவேஷன் சைட்ஸ் ஆர் அ பிளென்டி பிஃபோர் இட் அண்ட் ஆஃப்டர் இட். Before the Keeladi fiasco and after it, we have enough sites which has given us, yielded better wealth, archaeological wealth, to talk about the Tamil civilization, to take pride in it, to run it parallel to what is described in the Sangam and more. If anything, if you go there at Keeladi, to Keeladi, you'll see this museum. That's Keeladi Site Museum nu vekkala. It is not named as Keeladi Site Museum, and that has a political reason behind it. I leave it to you to decipher it. Anga poi parunga. But a site museums should have what has been discovered there. This particular museum is more bringing together of what has been discovered in many sites, just in case to morph it and make it look like this is all from Keeladi. But if you start reading each of the label and walking around it and taking notes of it, many of what are exhibited, many exhibits there are not directly from Keeladi to begin with. So Keeladi from 2015-16, slowly, ASI did start, was in fact involved in it, and I had a very long phone call with Shri P.S. Sriraman, a very learned scholar who was serving as the SA when Keeladi was happening, superintending archaeologist from Madras Circle. So this gentleman was the one who was in charge when ASI said enough is enough, we are leaving it here. And then the state government of Tamil Nadu State Government Archaeology took it over from there. So this gentleman feels that Keeladi, like many other sites in Tamil Nadu, has yielded what it can. But to compare it with Indus Valley, we'll need many more Keeladis. Pottery with Tamil Brahmi inscriptions is an interesting find. Not that it is new. We have many potsherds from other excavations also, which has Tamil Brahmi script on it. That's an ancient Tamil script. We have lithic records, stone records with the same script in many parts around Madurai, dozens of sites in south of Tamil Nadu especially. So adila we find these beautiful names etched. Most of them are names. Potla பேர் நம்ம கல்யாணத்துல சீர் பாத்திரம் கொடுக்கும்போது அதுல பேர் அடிச்சு கொடுக்குறோம் இல்லையா, அப்பவே ஆரம்பிச்சாச்சு. Probably, or the potter's name, we are not sure, but names, individuals today, names have been printed. Interestingly, you have names like Adiran, Kuviran oru பேர் இருக்கு. Can you take a guess as to probably what or where this comes from? A cognate. இல்லை நீங்கள் இல்லை, வேற யாராவது. A random guess. Kuberan. யார் இது? If anything, Kuviran can only go till Kuberan. The va, ba, மாறுறது நிறைய Oriental languagesல உண்டு. So that's Kuberan. Now, if you want to force us and make us believe that The Keeladi people were so naive that they knew nothing about gods and were never believers. Just because there are no temples, well, you have a Kuberan there. Not even a name that's very popular in Tamil Nadu today, but back then, one of the Ashtadik Balakas, we all know what he is capable of giving us. So, அவரோட பேர் வருது ஆதிரன், அதிரன், இது ஆதிரைங்கிற ப்ராபப்ளி ஆருத்ராலேருந்து வரணும். இந்த மாதிரி இருக்கிற நேம்ஸ் எல்லாம். ஸோ வாட் வி டூ இஸ் கன்வீனியன்ட்லி points that needs to be discussed to prove your aliter alone is being taken, and all of these are brushed out. There are several pages dedicated in the report which talks about the names from these potsherds. எந்த சைட்டில் என்ன டேட்டில் என்ன ட்ரென்ச்சில் எங்கேருந்து கிடச்சிது இவ்வளோ லிஸ்ட் கொடுக்குறாங்க. பட் இன்ஃபேக்ட் இஃப் எனி திங் an extension from that name list taking you to a research on the names alone and finding out what kind of approach they had for naming their kids, that's worthwhile a study. ஸோ இந்த மாதிரியான பாட்ஷர்ட்ஸ் நிறைய கிடச்சிது. All the discovery, close to 18,000 artifact, அப்படின்னு ஒரு நம்பர் வச்சுருக்காங்க. பட் all of it all has something to do with crafts, weights, trades, beads, gold. இது இந்த மாதிரியான ஃபைண்ட்ஸே தான் இருந்துட்டு வந்திருக்கு. ஸோ we can safely assume that it is, if anything, probably an industrial site. Not a settlement, industrial site. Probably it's an industrial site. So the brick structures there, that's probably the second most popular topics. What did we discover there? Everybody will be happy to say no religious structures. Well, nothing so far as religious structures have been discovered there. We don't have any temples, we don't have any images of gods or terracotta figurines of major gods, minor gods. And அதெல்லாம் தாண்டி அப்படி எதுவும் பெருசாக கிடைக்கல. But that being said, what did we get? We had a lot of spring wells, tubes, tunnels, தண்ணி போகிறதுக்கான ஒரு ட்ரெயின் சிஸ்டம், பாய்லர்ஸ், மெனி பாய்லர்ஸ் இன்ஃபேக்ட் வித் கீழே நெருப்பு பற்ற வைக்கிறதுக்கு ஒரு இடம் கொடுத்து ட்ரைபாடுக்கு மேலே ஒரு ஃபிக்ஸ்ட் ஏர்ன் ஒன்று வச்சு பாய்லர்ஸ் ஹவ் பீன் டிஸ்கவர்ட். ஸோ if anything, all of the setup, the infrastructure that is there, that have been so far discovered, are predominantly industrial in nature. Now, 5,000, 10,000 years from now, somebody chances upon the Guindy industrial estate as an excavation site and goes around digging it to find no huge temple. Can somebody come to a conclusion that whoever lived in this part of Tamil Nadu never believed in gods? That's an industrial site. That's an industrial site. There is only so much that an industrial site can give you. You cannot expect temples everywhere, right? கிட்டத்தட்ட அந்த மாதிரி தான். This is an industrial site. We have got a lot of industrial finds. And that by itself is to be praised for whatever intricacy with which they have carved, accuracy with which they have managed to make those beads and jewelry. Appreciated, no problem at all. But to keep just emphasizing that there are no gods and extending that to say the Tamil people in the initial stage never believed in God is too much for anybody's belief. So Sindhu Saraswathi and Keeladi, are they soulmates? Now, what are the similarities? What are the differences? But before going into that, the connection claims, what all do they claim? The urban planning. Dimension of brick is a serious topic of discussion in any archaeological site across the world. என்ன டைமென்ஷனில் brick இருக்கு, என்ன டெக்னிக்கில் brick has been baked. Both of these are described in any settlement. There are similarities, but we should not forget that some of the dimensions followed by the Pallavas continue till the times of the Cholas, which gets continued till the Vijayanagara kings, and maybe on the oru periya stone brick has been broken into two and then continues into the Vijayanagara. In the evolution has continued even within recent history of like 1,000 years that we can think about. We are talking about 6,000 years back. Making bricks was a significant invention, in fact, by mankind. Sun-dried bricks லேந்து kiln bricks மாறும்போது it's a huge leap by itself, which facilitated constructing those huge urban settlements. So அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு இடத்துல brick sizes being common, or the graffiti on pottery matching with the Indus seals, signs there from Indus, has been done. Now, this is valid. We can definitely consider this, but at what level? Are a dozen symbols like this and the matching with the graffiti in the pottery enough to say that people from both these regions spoke the same language or wrote the same language? These are individual graffiti, not even a word, and those are symbols. Any kid around the world, ஒரு 3 வயசு குழந்தைகிட்ட போயிட்டு வீடு வரைஞ்சி காட்டுன்னு சொன்னால் ஒரு ட்ரையாங்கிள் போட்டு கீழே ஒரு ஸ்கொயர் போட்டு ஒரு என்ட்ரன்ஸ் போட்டு இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் இவால்வ்டாக இருந்தால் ஒரு சிமினியை போட்டு அதில் ஒரு புகையை காட்டி கொடுக்கும். இன்னும் கொஞ்சம் இவால்வ் பண்ணணும்னா பின்னாடி 2 ட்ரையாங்கிள்ஸில் மலையை போட்டு மலைக்கு நடுவுலேருந்து ஒரு சூரியன் உதிச்சு வரும். வெரி சிம்பிள். This is, in fact, why this? Let's talk about even older. Several 10,000 years back, cave paintings and petroglyphs, rock carvings that we see around the world. Interestingly, man from all parts of the world, some in Russia, some in Europe, some in South America, some in India, எல்லா இடத்துலையும் similar subjects have been discussed and painted. Similar techniques to paint have been used. Similar colors to represent objects have been used too. This is the way human beings are made to think. ஒரு விஷயத்தை பார்த்து அப்படியே டெபிக் பண்ணுன்னு சொன்னால் this is exactly how it happens. So such symbols being available. இதை எப்போ ரெண்டு ஒன்றுன்னு சொல்லலாம்னா, when nowhere else in India you see these seals, nowhere else in India, none of the potsherds you get to see this set of symbols. If it is exclusive only to Keeladi, then we can zero down to say that this is probably a continuation from there, and people who came from there came with these signs and symbols and got it etched on their own pottery also. But interestingly, in the seals எல்லாம் ஏகப்பட்ட potsherds across India again are pretty much available to see. So this is nothing exclusive for Keeladi. Political context, not getting much into it, but yeah, we all know how it took a very political turn, and a lot of things happened. Yeah, why are they distinct? Why are they not actually besties? So if you consider Keeladi to be an extension, or to quote wherever Indus got over, Keeladi kind of continued from there. The difference of time to begin with, roughly a millennium and a half. How are we going to fix this difference? When the last phase of Indus kind of got over, and probably the last family from Indus migrated from there, it had taken 1500 years to land at Keeladi. In the 1500 varusha gap, how exactly are we going to fix it? So the decline happens at 1900 BC, and then 580 BC, almost 1000. Why I'm showing you this is, that's the very popular dancing girl from Indus. And this is a potsherd from an excavation site in Haryana. Now, you see the similarity. Is this enough for me to say, and there is a difference of time period too, is this enough for me to say that people only shifted to Haryana and all of them settled there? So Indus is probably worthy enough of calling as the cradle of Indian civilization, from which many different branches migrated and settled in many parts of India. அங்கேருந்து வந்து they've definitely ஒரு huge section has managed to travel all the way down south. Some of them settled in the central Deccan Plateau, some of them shifted up, some of them to the Gangetic Plains, and they've just managed to go across India in all possible directions. If anything, Indus is the starting point from where all of this had happened. It is nothing again to do exclusively to Keeladi. The geographical distances, this is from northwestern India, of Asia, and then this is in the southern India. The distance is very apparent to believe that they just uprooted themselves from there, used whatever technology to land at Keeladi. Quite not possible. If anything, the migration should have made them take stops in between en route. Anganga irundu tangi they have come. That's very natural, because as I told you, we have sites, archaeological sites excavated in parts of Maharashtra, up till even Maharashtra Karnataka border varaikum kondu varalam, where sites with brick structures similar to those of Keeladi, Indus, traditions, burial sites have all been there. Central Karnataka to Tamil Nadu is what is missing for a lot of reasons. Natural setup அந்த மாதிரி இருக்கு, where you don't see a very happening archaeological site, and suddenly you have Keeladi. If anything, the migration had taken many stops traveling from there, today's Rajasthan, Gujarat area, to Tamil Nadu, and so the similarities are apparent. But to believe that they got done with Indus and overnight took whatever it took for them to come from there and landed in the outskirts of Madurai to kickstart a new civilization seems very far-fetched. The Sindhu Saraswati's undeciphered script and the Tamil Brahmi script of Keeladi. The language similarities which is not visible for apparent eyes, visible only for a few, has been spoken about a lot. And in fact, the seals have been deciphered and identified as Tamil letters, Tamil script, and other படிச்செல்லாம் publish பண்ணிட்டு வராங்க. As I told you today, Indus script, from being a serious point of discussion, has been brought down to let's have a coffee over Indus script deciphering kinds. So people just sit across a table and இது இப்படி இருக்குமா அது அப்படி இருக்குமான்னு pictograph விளையாடுற மாதிரி போயிட்டு இருக்கு. Nevertheless, the Tamil Brahmi script is undoubtedly a proper established script with vowels, consonants, மாத்திரை கணக்குக்கு எல்லாத்துக்கும் they have scope. But what is missing is you don't have entire lyrics or lines written. We should not forget that it was almost the same time when Sangam poems were being authored. While you have such classics published, while you have people from various walks of life turning into poets to compose those beautiful songs, documenting a society which was very, very sophisticated, with a king in place, merchants, doctors, artists, all of them in place, and a very, very happening civilization, why did they not master the art of writing? Because most of these Tamil Brahmi inscriptions, this is from the Jain caves, just for a sample, I've given that. Most of these Tamil Brahmi inscriptions have syntax errors. Some of them even have spelling, typographic errors, spelling errors. இதெல்லாம் சேர்த்து தான் இருக்கு. So probably this difference between their mastery over composing poems and writing and getting them published versus domestic writing skills like this, that is one more topic of discussion which is not yet deciphered. But that being said, all said and done, the writing, the script, the technology that they have followed to evolve this language into a writable form seems to be much more than what Indus is. And any similarities there are pure coincidence in சொல்ற அளவுல தான் இப்போ வரைக்கும் we have discovered Indus or deciphered Indus script. The cultural differences of what you see here and there, the seals, if it was a continuation, we have not yet discovered any seal that runs close to the many seals of Indus here in Keeladi. That is one topic of discussion. அங்க இருந்த சீல்ஸினுடைய கண்டினியூவேஷன் எதுவும் வரல. Keeladi's secular focus, no religious structure, as opposed to faith-based structures seen in Indus, which includes the Great Bath and other places. The material culture, of course, அது இன்னும் போகணும். Yeah. Lack of evidence, stratigraphy at Keeladi is something that serious archaeologists keep criticizing about. They literally criticize, especially when it comes to the dagger axe, which we'll see very soon. அந்த ஒரு சின்ன ஒரு couple of milligrams of charcoal, God knows from where it landed on the dagger axe. It was sent for test, and that the time period that it gave has been now accepted to be the time period of the Iron Age as such happening in Tamil Nadu then. அதுக்கு வரேன் நான். But before that, conclusive proof of continuity with material evidence, supported by material evidence, is not even happening. The Iron Age bridge, in the 1500 years in between, where Indus got over and Keeladi was happening, that is when the Iron Age is kind of considered to have been very happening and popular here. But do we directly see any links of Iron Age prevalent in Keeladi, in and around Keeladi, to an extent to say that the Iron Age in Tamil Nadu started like some 6,000 years back? அவ்வளோ சொல்கிறதுக்கு இருக்கான்னு கேட்டால், in the dagger axe, this is being shown. Most recently, this made the headlines and everybody was proud about it. Let's also feel proud about it. But where exactly did they land on this? That's where I said the stratigraphy. Archaeological trenches, when you draft a trench and when you dig and get in, documenting at every level is considered very, very significant. It is not that you will use crowbars to dig and go in and tunnel it in to see. அப்படிலாம் பண்ண முடியாது. Handheld tools till date, every milligram of sand removed from there is very, very carefully removed, brushed at every step to scoop off. Anything that comes out is thoroughly examined and only earth is moved out. Any object, even a broken potsherd, is all collected. But as they get collected, trench-wise, depth-wise, day-wise, direction of the trench-wise, it is all documented. Because finding an object is one thing. To make a note of in which trench, at what level, in which direction, along with what it was discovered, changes the interpretation of that object completely. So it cannot be, hey, I just found this, you cannot uproot it. You will have to document it first. And if it is going to be an object which is worthy of sending in for carbon dating, in fact, if somebody spots something like that, the entire team is alerted. People gather around there to make sure minimum intervention of atmospheric air. The object is covered with the aluminum foil, put inside a cover. The couple of people even sign it. A note is written, which trench, what date, who were those who picked it. Idallathiyum note pannittu only then it is sent. In this case, the report is available on Tamil Nadu State Government, State Archaeology's website about the axe and the charcoal that was available with it. To begin with, in the axe, ஒரு microscopic level, ஒரு charcoal piece. That is what has been used as material evidence to push the Iron Age of Tamil Nadu so old. You cannot imagine. இது headlinesல சொல்லும்போது இதெல்லாம் சொல்ல மாட்டான். We'll be very happy that the Iron Age in Tamil Nadu was flourishing even before it was happening in other parts of India. Very happy, yes. But how did they determine such a blatant claim with that one small piece chunk, in fact something less than a chunk of charcoal, which was discovered by somebody who the somebody is not available to vouch for it to begin with. Secondly, to say that this sample is enough to prove such a huge claim. Because இவ்வளவு பெரிய sample, இவ்வளவு பெரிய ஒரு date timeline shiftக்கெல்லாம் போறோம்னா, the sample should be of feasible quantity. And many such samples from other areas, from the same site at least, other trenches, have got to be discovered at the same level. None of these principles were applied. Just to say, and even how did it land? A small chunk of charcoal, how did it land on the blades of this dagger? Nobody knows about it. It can be anything that has turned into a charcoal, maybe a small piece of wood or whatever. But how did it land on this has not yet been answered at all. So when this was discovered and a statement that the Iron Age has been pushed behind, இதெல்லாம் வந்தபோது some people did pounce on it, and social media நிறைய இந்த டிஸ்கஷன்லாம் போச்சு. But people were not ready to accept for a fact that this is not enough to prove that Iron Age is so old in Tamil Nadu. Material evidences completely lacks when it comes to talking about the dagger axe. Migration magic, the alternate migration theory, whether from Keeladi we moved upwards to Indus. அதுவுமே இப்போ ரொம்ப சீரியஸாக பேசிட்டு இருக்காங்க. But what is to be discussed there is, if there was a supposed shift from south to north, what happened to the people who shifted? Because today it's a kind of a no man's land there. அங்கே போனவங்க எல்லாம் என்ன ஆனாங்கன்னு ஒரு கேள்வி இருக்குது. ஸோ அதுக்குள்ளே ரொம்ப போகிறது இல்லை. Some of the points that scholars here feel is strong enough to say that Keeladi and Indus are one and the same. ஒரு 5-6 சொல்கிறாங்க. அது ரொம்ப ஈஸி தான், டக்கு டக்குன்னு பார்த்துடலாம். வன்னி மரம், this is வன்னி tree, and this is seen in the seals in Keeladi, in Indus. And on the seal and the chinna leaves sort of foliage வச்சு காமிச்சிருக்காங்க. There is one particular seal where people are shown, probably revering it for whatever it is. And in the Vanni Maram is available in plenty in Tamil Nadu. Highways எல்லாம் ஃபுல்லாக இருக்குது. Vanni Maram is worshipped in Indus Valley civilization. Check box 1. We are the same. Second, the humped cattle, the zebuன்னு சொல்கிற அந்த மாடு, which is there in the seal, very popular. He is seen in many parts of countries up and below the equator. நிறைய ஊரில் இருக்கார். இந்த ஒரு மாடு, அந்த ஹம்ப் இருக்குது, and we are fighting with it. Jallikattu, as a tradition is going, dedicate some 20-30 pages for a report for this, to claim that this is enough a reason to say we are one and the same. மதுரை பக்கத்தில் இந்த மாடு இருக்குது. We are still playing Jallikattu there. So, we are all the same. மாடு வந்துட்டதுனால, ஒரு செடியெல்லாம் வந்துட்டதுனால, why leave a bird? You have a tree, you have an animal, take a bird into consideration. Roosters. Some of the seals in Indus has 2 roosters kept one next to another. And அதே மாதிரி சேவல் எங்ககிட்டயும் இருக்குது. We are also having rooster fights. We are one and the same. So, I mean, I'm not even, இது எல்லாமே they have actually said. They have actually quoted all of this. Pages and pages have been written to point out these 7-8 attributes which are common to both Indus and Keeladi, to say that we are all the same. Pottery. These are called as BRW, black and red ware pottery. The colors with which the pottery comes out is considered very significant an attribute, because burning of pottery is a technique by itself. So in every region, the way the pottery has been kiln burnt, gives us a clue as to when this was happening. And அதை வச்சு சில ட்ரெடிஷன்ஸ் எல்லாம் கொண்டு வர முடியும். அதனால the color with which the pottery has been discovered, that's a point. But black and red ware pottery இங்கே நிறைய கிடச்சிருக்கு, இண்டஸ்லையும் இருக்குது. So we are one and the same is very far-fetched, because you get black and red ware starting from France, in many other countries in the Europe. எல்லா இடத்துலையும் கிட்டத்தட்ட இதே டைம் or even older, we have enough BRW discovered there. Worst in case is dice. Believe me, they actually have a couple of chapters dedicated for all of these in their books. And இந்த டைஸை பற்றி சொல்லும்போது, நாங்களும் டைஸை வச்சு விளையாடிருக்கோம். சங்கப்பாடலில் எங்கள் வீட்டு பெண்கள்லாம் தாயம் உருட்டி விளையாடினதை பற்றின குறிப்புகள் வருது. இண்டஸ் வேலிலையும் டைஸ் இருக்குது. ஸோ நாங்கள் ஒன்று. சரி, இருந்துட்டு போட்டோம். நெக்ஸ்ட், need for scientific rigor. This is too huge a claim to be forced down anybody's throat to believe with these aspects as a statement for substantiating. இதை வச்சுட்டு அதை டெஃபினட்டாக சொல்ல முடியாது. I'll be very happy if where Sindhu got over, Keeladi started. Now I'm happy to take it for a fact. Yeah, but there isn't substantiate evidence, material evidence, to prove this huge acclaim. If this happens, you're actually talking about a cultural shift in history which is to be discussed globally. This is very, very significant, in fact, but is it even possible? No, not at all. So tying it up seems to be a very far-fetched idea with whatever is available now. And so the gap of 1,300 years has got to be answered. The distance, the script and artifacts and the faith focus, not yet answered. Evidences of any kind of link, cultural, archaeological, architectural, which is unique only to Keeladi and Indus Valley, has not yet been discovered too. 1,300 years kind of kills any kind of direct link. And one point that I have not spoken, I'll just make it here. There is one long list published of names in and around Indus civilization, which sounds very similar to Tamil names. CHOL, Chol, Pandya, Podini, Vel, இந்த மாதிரி இருக்கிற நேம்ஸ், there is a list made. தொண்டி, வஞ்சி, கரூர், இந்த மாதிரி எல்லாம் ஒரு நேம்ஸ் இருக்கு. This was actually எப்படி இருக்க முடியும் அப்படின்னு ஒரு தாட் இருந்தது. Then I checked, yes, they do exist. And I just gave ஒரு ஏஐயோட உட்காந்து ஒரு 2-3 நாள் இந்த நேம்ஸ் எல்லாம் இருக்கிற மாதிரி வேற தானா ஊர்ல எல்லாம் பேர் இருக்கான்னு கேட்டா ஒரு 10 பக்கத்துக்கு I have got some list. And I tell you, there is a Marakanam in no, not Pondicherry. There is a Marakanam in Spain, if I'm right. There is a Marakanam. I have the list if somebody wants. So this is a good, nice, summer game for kids to sit and play and see that, names which are similar sounding. There are Salems there. There is a Vellore in Canada. Whatnot. Is this enough to say that people who went from here, carried these names, settled there, gave it to their people? This is actually put forward as one of the reasons. அதனால தான் எடுத்து நான் சொல்லிட்டு இருக்கேன். ஸோ பொதினி, அது ரொம்ப சங்கம் நேம். அது பழனி மலையை வந்து பொதினின்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. அது அந்த 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 ஒரு 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 ட்ரெடிஷ்னல் ஒரு டைனாஸ்டியோட பேர், ஒரு சிறு குறுநில மன்னர்களுடைய பேர். அது பொதினியை சேர்ந்த ஆய் மன்னன் பாடப்பட்டிருக்காரு, எல்லாம் சரி. அந்த பொதினியுடைய வேரியிங் காக்னெட்ஸ், எஸ், பட் தீஸ் ஆர் நான் அஃபர்மேட்டிவ் காக்னெட்ஸ். பொதினிங்கிறதுல POYDINIன்னு போட்டால் you might end up in finding some port town somewhere in Portugal which has this name. But can I start telling that people from Palani Malay shifted to there and named that port town by their memory and called it by that? See, York-க்கு நியூயார்க்குக்கு சம்பந்தத்தையோ ஜெர்சிக்கும் நியூ ஜெர்சிக்கும் சம்பந்தத்தையோ பேசுறாங்கன்னா that's documented history, very recent history. In fact, names in the US with connects from Europe is very recent history, supposedly by migration. People are there, you can run DNA tests, history is documented. But to believe that this happened some 6,000 years back and people migrated from Keeladi, went there, started naming the towns after their kings and their, and even it is not even fully there, அப்படியே இருக்கல, with a lot of change. If anything, you can call it as a cognate. But that being put forward for a reason, again, is too much. And then importance of both the sides, never undermining it, are equally important. But again, I have my own reservation to say there are enough sites which are more potential, which has created more archaeological wealth to Tamil Nadu other than Keeladi also. Urban planning in Indian cities, it is exclusive in the Indus civilization. Keeladi has not yet gone even close to it. Fire altars and Vedic rites, they are very exclusive here. Trade weights, commerce legacy spanning across the oceans to trade off with other countries, that is very much there. Keeladi will have to prove that. Regional variations is also there. Continuity of the Iron Age, as seen there, is pretty evident as opposed to Keeladi. Keeladi and Iron Age is a separate topic for discussion, which has got to be debunked too. So, we will have to expand Keeladi to more wider width to understand its full story. Critical discourses should be facilitated, should happen without any fear, without being threatened, but I wish it happens. Prioritizing material archaeological evidence over emotions. That's very, very significant when it comes to presenting a theory that Keeladi and Sindhu are one and the same. I have consciously avoided statistical data or years or names of people engaged or anything particular like a trench number or a width or other things. I've just woven it like a story to introduce Sindhu and what it is for. Why do I want to call it as Saraswati? And then introduce Keeladi. The apparent differences and what are looked upon as similarities, which aren't strong proof to say that they are one and the same. So this is a very, very simple attempt, and to just tell the story about how they are similar and why they are different, and prove for a fact that they cannot be even distant cousins. At that level, I'm concluding it. Thank you all.
what do you think the probable dates of Sangam age, the literature age?
ரொம்பவே எக்ஸ்பேண்ட் ஆகலாம் as in இந்த சைடில் காமன் ஈரால I personally feel it can even go up to the 4th or the 5th century. Not getting into the 17 கணக்கு at all, only talking about 10 பாட்டு and 8 தொகை, pulling it till 4th or 5th century is still possible before of the common era, even till 4th or 5th century, because we have this tendency to call that the Sangam existed 300 years before and after the zero line, 300 BCE, 300 CE. 300 BCE can definitely expand. It can even go up to the 5th or the 6th century of the BCE. So that's quite possible. But certain works, or to be particular, a few poems, and the style in which it has been authored and the content that it has can be taken all the way up to the 4th or the 5th century of the common era also.
Yeah, the Sangam literature is very classic, sophisticated.
It is, undoubtedly.
No doubt about it.
Undoubtedly.
But the script, the lipi in Tamil Nadu was not in line with those style of the classics.
Exactly.
Right? Is there any research has been done to prove we have lost that?
If anything, we should have had a rich Chittre Eluthu is what seems to be the possible explanation as to how they were writing. Because அங்கே சொன்ன மாதிரி பாட்டில் இருக்கிற classic nature writing techniquesல இல்லைன்னும் போது something seems to be a mismatch there. Yeah. There should have existed a language with established script there, and grammar நிச்சயமா இருந்திருக்கு. அது ஒரு ஸ்டேட்மெண்ட்டாக எழுதும்போது they should have applied it, followed it, no doubt. But what happened to those characters? What was the script is still a question. தொல்காப்பியர் ஏதோ ஒன்று ரெண்டு அங்கங்கே போகும்போது சொல்லிட்டு போகிறார். A couple of footnotes there gives us a clue of a supposed script that existed even before the Tamil Brahmi came into place.
Yeah. And connect to this Keeladi and Sindhu Saraswathi, I hope there is no helicopter service from Indus Valley to Keeladi. Take off and land.
கண்டுபிடிச்சாலும் ஆச்சரியப்பட முடியாது.
Sir, hi sir, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Jayavashni. I'm studying in Shishayama School, currently in 12th grade. And I really liked the session. I learned many new things. Thank you for the wonderful session. So my question, I have two questions actually. The first question is, if the Indus Valley civilization was Dravidian, does that make Tamil culture older and more foundational to the Indian civilization than the Vedic culture? My second question is, could the Tamil Sindhu connection rewrite India's national narrative, and is that why it's being ignored and not given much importance to it?
To begin with, what exactly do you mean by it's being ignored? Needs some thought. The central government did support it to whatever level it can, the first 1 or 2 phases, and the reports, yes, they did, and the reports are available for you to see. And archaeologists who headed the session then are pretty much rooted in Tamil Nadu. They are from here. But the report given said that what can be done has been done, and didn't really give any scope for further excavations. So at that level it was closed. But yes, the state government showed more interest, and they wanted to take it up, and it continued. And what exactly is the difference in what has been discovered between these two excavations? The dagger axe probably, which has come up with a lot of more questions that are yet to be answered. So to say that it was ignored at some level has a little of political tinge to it. Let that stay there. Now coming to this, the first two questions of yours, to say that if this can rewrite Indian history, I'd be really happy if it can push documented history of India still further, but not at this level. We don't have enough material evidence to say it can be rewritten at this point. அதனால தான் சொல்லியிருந்தேன், கீழடி இன்னுமே நிறைய இன்ட்ரெஸ்ட் காட்டலாம். லெட்ஸ் எக்ஸ்பேண்ட் இட் மோர். லெட் த எக்ஸ்கவேஷன் ஹேப்பன் more rigorously to covering a wider range of grounds there. இப்போ வரைக்கும் ஒரு huge hub of economic, industrial activities, burial sites within like 1.5 kilometers gap between these two. இவ்வளோ தான் கண்டுபிடிச்சிருக்கோம். Sites, residential units, streets are still there, yet to be discovered for what they are. Maybe with that, we can see if we can really push it older than it and then call it as the point of India's cultural origin.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Hello. From a culture which had burial urns, we moved on to cremation. When did this happen?
See, burial as a topic of discussion when we read anthropology is very important. And across the globe, every settlement had more than one pattern of burying or cremating. So attending to the dead has always been in more than one fashion. Urn burial, burying on the ground, just laying them flat and burying, and cremation. All three have been seen in many, many culture. To say that this was happening till a point of time and then we switched over to it doesn't really fit into a prescribed archaeological flow, because even today, yeah, we have both the types. We do have burial grounds, we do have cremation grounds. So every culture has had many different ways in which they treated the dead. So either to say that this got over and then this shift happened, அதுக்கு அவ்வளோ ஸ்கோப் இருக்க முடியாது.
Same civilization. And we have shifted. Today, what you see, burial and cremation, are different faiths. It's not the same civilization.
Keeladi, if anything, should have been a cosmopolitan settlement. No doubt about it. So, multiple cultures coming in. Talking about that Adichanallur samples, bone samples, have given us woofing results. Majority of the bone samples collected belongs to the Mongolian race. Thousands of years back, why did so many belonging to the Yellow race shifted over to what looks like an insignificant village today on the banks of Tamrabarni? Like, not even many of us even, namale yaar and side romba poradilla. They have settled there and it has been a happening site. So how and why this happened, that's a separate area of study. So this should have been a cosmopolitan settlement. One of the norms for a cosmopolitan settlement is for people from different faith and backgrounds to get together and live, and they would have had their own separate ways to treat the dead.
I have the mic and the next question here on your far left. So your presentation seemed to go like, claim A, this sounds too far-fetched. Claim B, this sounds too far-fetched. Claim C, and then you go on till Z. So isn't the idea that how can there be so many coincidences and then everything being far-fetched?
What are the coincidences?
And no, I'm saying you can consider that individually, which is what you've done. And therefore, my question is this a academic analysis, or would you call this a coffee table analysis?
The methodology for today's presentation, as I finished off, as I told you when I was signing up, is to just present what has been published as discovery and evaluating it to see if the end result, again published, matches with what they say. The weightage of what has been discovered, will it be enough to accept this statement that this is extremely ancient and this is a close cousin of Indus. So, அதனால தான் நான் சொன்னேன், I'm not talking about the trenches or இவ்வளோ இந்த statistics அதுக்குள்ளே நான் போகலை. By and large, what is being provided as this is Keeladi, this is Indus. We see these things that seems like, connecting between each other. But are those things that are listed as good points of connect worthy enough or heavy enough to say that they are one and the same? That's exactly what I've tried.
The talk was really nice. Thank you. So my question essentially is, right now it seems that architectural evidence seems to be the main like data point to consider anything from dating to cultural things and all that. But is there not enough room in the academic discourse to use other forms of dating and like data points?
Like
For example, if you take my question essentially is where do texts like the Ramayana and Mahabharata fit into this whole thing? Because if you see there are some stars patterns which can be dated. That is also science, right? You can just
talking about the Indus
Right.
Saraswati civilization, for people who propagated that as a theory, have made some allocation in their reports involving the Tirtha Yatra that Balarama took,
Okay.
the constellations or the position of stars and other planets as discussed in the Mahabharata, especially before and after the war, and during the war, if there is a supposed destruction of a natural destruction of a huge scale, as documented in these epics, have all been applied to.
And my follow-up essentially is we see that people in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata have been called like they have learnt the Vedas. Then why are the Vedas being dated much later?
See, dating of Vedas, I'm sure, I don't think we have arrived at any convincing timeline. Pretty much like Sangam literature, over years, or 100 varsham, இப்படி அப்படிலாம் we've been adding. So dating of Vedas, I think in the last 40-50 years, we've been just following Max Muller's descriptions. For whatever content that he had, the tools that he applied, he has given us a timeline, other we have been following. That definitely needs, especially the sections of Vedas. See, if he says it's 5,000 years, we cannot definitely say that all the 4 Vedas, the enormous number of Upanishads and the other Upangas, everything was authored within that span. நிச்சயமா சொல்ல முடியாது. So with that flowing on either sides, giving it an assigned timeline, அது தனியாவே யோசிக்கணும் before applying it over Indus.
Hi, I'm Akshada from Sisha OMR in grade 10. Was Indus Valley civilization a single unified civilization or a collection of culturally similar but politically independent city-states?
It had happened in phases, and the vast area that it has been sprinkled around seems like it couldn't have been all under one crown or one throne kind of a setup. Their political their political bent or shift is not yet discovered. We don't have anything to talk about how they were politically governed or what kind of system existed. It could have existed in phases, that's it. It evolved in phases and it happened in phases.
So thanks for the insightful session first, Madhu. So the question I had was something similar to what the other person said. So if you look at the map of the IVC and the geographical locations, right? So on the north side we had the Raki Garhi, which had a specific finding of the chariot, and down towards the coast of the Gujarat we had the Lothal, which is a coastal town. And near to that we have the sunken city of Dwaraka. So in terms of based on the current available timelines and the datings, how do you correlate these two instances? Like, I mean, the Mahabharata locations and the IVC in terms of timelines or the influences?
Again, see, the general religious belief about Krishna's, let's take Krishna because Mahabharata is woven around him. The religious belief, just being very thing here, Dwapara Yukam, 5000 Swacham Varusham Munadi, runs somewhere parallel to the timeline that we have here also. பட் இன்னைக்கு இருக்கிற துவாரகா சிட்டிக்கு பக்கத்துலேயே தான் அந்த துவாரகா இருந்ததா, அங்கேயே அது அப்படியே சப்மர்ஜ் ஆச்சு, அதோடைய பேங்க்ஸ்லேயே புதுசாக இப்போ உருவாயிருக்கிறது, அதை அப்படியே எடுத்துக்க முடியுமா, அதனுடைய கண்டினியூஷனாக எடுத்துக்க முடியுமாங்கிறதெல்லாம் we need more data. Without that in place, combining such highlight events with what information we have on the Indus Valley cannot be done. We cannot accomplish anything out there.
Theory that when Dwaraka submerged and Satyaki, Krishna's brother and his family migrated towards, and that's the story behind Parthasarathi temple here, right? You have Satyaki Sannadhi. So could the similarities between Indus Valley and Keeladi could it be attributed to this migration? And
see, Satyaki varikulam poga venda, Sangam paadalliye there is this reference about how கபாட்டபுரத்துலேருந்து அந்த துவாரகை பக்கத்துலேருந்து அகஸ்தியர் ஒரு 21 வேளிர்களை கூட்டிகிட்டு he walked down south and got them all settled around Madurai. Reference இருக்குது. And there is a theory that the 3 Madurais that existed where the Sangam, Tamil Sangam was happening, the second city which got submerged is what is called as Kapatapuram, which is also Dwaraka. Dwaraka அப்படிங்கிறதே கபாட்டபுரம் தான், கபாட்டம்னா என்ட்ரன்ஸ் தான். இந்த துவாரகையிலேயே செகண்ட் சிவிலைசேஷன், செகண்ட் தமிழ் சங்கம் நடந்தது. அண்ட் அங்கேருந்து மூழ்கினதுக்கு அப்புறமா அகஸ்தியர் இவங்க எல்லாரும் கூட்டிகிட்டு கீழே வந்திருக்காருன்னு ஒரு தியரி எல்லாம் இருக்குது. Migration from somewhere in the west coast down south had happened. At what level and how did it happen is a separate area of subject. And on that note, I should tell you, the Satyaki Sannadhi inside the Garbhagraham of today's Parthasarathi dates close to the 1600 in the Common Era. We have an inscription which clearly talks about a Nutana Pradishtai of Parthasarathi along with all his family members. To connect this with Satyaki's coming down, அது தேவையில்லை. சாத்தியக்கி வந்திருக்கார், அது புராணத்தில் இருக்கு. அதுக்கான ப்ரூஃப் பார்த்தசாரதி கோவிலில் இருக்குன்னு சொல்றது கொஞ்சம் இல்ல. அப்படி கேட்க ஆரம்பிச்சா இந்த சாத்தியக்கியோட மைக்ரேஷனுக்கு இன்னும் எத்தனை கோயில்கள் இருக்குன்னு கேள்வி வரும். அந்த ஒரு கோயிலில் தான் இருக்கார். ஸோ இது நான் இப்படி ஒரு இது கொண்டு வந்துட்டேன், அதுக்கு அவைலபிளாக இருக்கிறது ஒன்றோ ரெண்டோ அதை நான் சேர்த்து இங்கே சாம்பிளாக யூஸ் பண்ணிக்கிறேன்னு சொல்றது might not be there, but suppose a migration of some sort had definitely happened.
Sir.
And that being said, Agasthyar coming down, along with which so many history, so many temples, so many faith systems have all been linked together, needs an anthropological viewpoint also. Adu thaniya pannanom.
Sir, just going with the historical record, after the Indus Valley civilization script, whatever, if you would call that a script, for more than 1,000 years till Ashoka Brahmi emerges, there is no historical record of any inscription or script. So it's just a dark period in between which has not been...
One of the reasons that is put forward to say that the script, as we call it in Indus Valley, probably is not even a script.
Right. But there is no... what I'm trying to say is that there's no whatever, there's no writing tool that you are just mentioning, if a sophisticated culture should know writing. So there's no record of writing till Brahmi emerges.
They probably wrote on something that's perishable.
Possible, but of course they didn't obviously realize that it's perishable then, right? Okay. Now, second thing, the R. Balakrishnan's theory about this multiple names, toponymic theory that he's talking about, he's not talking about one. He's talking about a cluster of names. So your dismissal of like this name being in Portugal or something, it's not a cluster. So he's talking specifically about clusters, and that is the potential occurrence of clusters.
What exactly do you mean by cluster?
All those names that you mentioned, like Karur or
Vanji, Tondi,
all that, in a small geographical area, and current Indus is about 1 million square kilometers, right?
அந்த மேப்ஸ் அவர் இந்த நேம்ஸ்க்கு மேப் பண்ணி பப்ளிஷ் பண்ணியிருக்காரு.
ஆமாம், அந்த புக்ல
பார்த்துருக்கீங்க இல்லையா? அதோட ஸ்கேலை வச்சுட்டு நீங்கள் சொல்கிற அந்த ஸ்மால் ஜியாகிரபிக்கல் ஏரியாவை மார்க் பண்ணி பாருங்க. You will know, not that there are these triplets of Karur, Vanji and Tondi just punched all over Indus. There are 3 or 4 Karurs, there are 4 or 5 Vanji, 2 or 3 Tondis, and then you have Chola, Pandya, Chera, Podini. The it is just sprinkled.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to contrast it with your statement.
It is not available in clusters.
Exactly.
It is not available in clusters. So they are individual. On this widespread map of Indus Valley sites, these names are sprinkled all around.
Correct, but the similar clusters exist in south. That is what he's.
Ingeme cluster illiya. You have one Karur, you have one Tondi, you have one Vanji.
But that's very different from connecting it to Portugal. It's like Maracanam in Portugal.
Yeah, just because this is slightly close and that's slightly far, you cannot push this and say that, idu ipditha irundhukka mudiyum epdi solla mudiyum.
Yeah, then
is this based on the distance that you say it cannot be applied?
No, I'm just talking cluster. If a face is a cluster of dots, if you see a similar face with a cluster of dots, that's how you match it.
Right.
That's what he's trying to show in that
map
book, is that he's trying to show that a similar cluster of names existed there. That is the
Karur, Tondi, Pandya Natla, and inge or Vanji, if it's a triangle, or I think or corridor or something like that, or pair vekkarar. இது அப்படியே அங்கே அப்ளை பண்ணாலும் they are dispersed.
Okay.
I have a question. After Indus Valley Civilization, our academic records talk, the next sort of large civilization that appeared is the Maurya and the pre-Maurya Janapadas, which were all centered around the Ganga Jamuna river.
Gangetic basin.
Which you didn't talk of that eastward migration of these people. Unrelated or related to this, Jared Diamond in his book on guns, germs and steel points to many different migration patterns, studies many different migration patterns, and says east-west migrations are easier on people than north-south migrations because your whole weather pattern changes, agriculture has to be almost reinvented. So don't you think it is more likely that the Indus Valley people moved eastwards towards Ganga?
Because I was comparing Keeladi, I was emphasizing on the southwards. Okay. But I think Nadula somewhere I told that they have spread across. They've spread across the Gangetic plains also. Especially the Varanasi excavation has proven very good results to say that it is old by at least 3,000 to 4,000 years old. The settlement on the Ganges banks.
சார் வணக்கம்.
வணக்கம்.
சரஸ்வதி நதி பற்றி சொல்லியிருந்தீங்களே, இப்போ நம்மளது ஆதி சரஸ்வதின்ட்டு ஒரு சிலை ஒன்று இருக்குது. அந்த சிலையில் வீணை அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு பொருள் இல்லை, சரஸ்வதியை வெறும் பெண் தெய்வமாக தான் வழிபடுறாங்க. அதுக்கப்புறமா தான் அவங்கக்கிட்ட வீணை ஆகட்டும் ஆயக்கலைகள் எல்லாமே அவங்கக்கிட்ட வருதுங்கிறாங்க. அதுக்கு முன்னாடி காளி தான் ஆயக்கலைகளில் எல்லாத்தையும் பண்ணுறாங்க அப்படின்ட்டு ஒரு இருக்குது. அப்படி பார்த்தா ஒருவேளை சரஸ்வதிங்கிற அந்த நதியை தான் நம்ம தெய்வமாக வழிபடுறோம். ப்ளஸ் அங்கே இருந்ததுனால தான் வேதங்கள் எல்லாம் வந்துச்சு, அதில் கலைகள் வந்துச்சுங்கிறதுனால சரஸ்வதியை வழிபடுறோமா, இல்லை எதனால் காளி அந்த முதல்ல காளிக்கு தான் ஆயக்கலைகள் இருந்தது அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு விஷயம் இருக்கா? இது எப்படி புரிஞ்சுக்கிறது?
சரஸ்வதி கையில் வீணை எப்போ போச்சு அப்படிங்கிறது ஒரு டிஸ்கஷன். இன்றைக்கி நம்மெல்லாம் பார்த்து பழகின கேலண்டர் ஆர்ட்டில் இருக்கிற சரஸ்வதி ஹோல்ட்ஸ் விஜய ரகுநாத நாயக்கர் வடிவமைத்த வீணையை அவங்க வாசிச்சுட்டு இருக்காங்க. அந்த வீணை இஸ் a couple of centuries old. ஸோ நாட் தட் சத்தியலோகத்துக்கு ஒரு வேளை போனோன்னா சரஸ்வதி அந்த வீணை வாசிட்டு இருப்பாங்க, நம்மளால ஷுவராக சொல்ல முடியாது. பட் வீணாபாணின்னு சரஸ்வதியை சொல்கிறது ஆல்சோ இஸ் பிரிட்டி ஏன்ஷியன்ட். But that does not rub off the fact that Kali also has been playing the Veenai. If anything, the first stotram on Kali by Kalidasa, opening statements, he says, Manikya Veena Mapalayantim da Arambikrar. Kali da Solrar and Shamalingra Kali da, no doubt about it. She is definitely the mother of fine arts. Saraswati is more Brahmabatni, who was in charge of the Vedas. And from Vedas, we extended into anything that helps you with wisdom and knowledge. So, ஃபைன் ஆர்ட்ஸ்க்கு சரஸ்வதிங்கிறது கொஞ்சம் லேட்டர் பீரியடுக்கு அப்புறமா தான் அந்த அந்த ஒரு 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 எக்ஸ்டென்ஷன் மாதிரி அது எல்லாத்தையும் சேர்த்து கொண்டு போகிறோம். பட் தட் பீயிங் செட், வர்ஷிப் ஆஃப் சரஸ்வதி ஃபார் வாட் ஷி இஸ், விஸ்டம், விச் இஸ் ஆல்வேஸ் ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஹியர், ஹேஸ் பீன் தேர். அண்ட் அதனால அந்த நதிக்கும் அந்த பேரையே வச்சு அப்படியே வந்திருக்கிறதுக்கு வாய்ப்பு இருக்குது.
I did something very interesting. When he was talking about river Saraswati, I used ChatGPT and asked the question whether river Saraswati existed. And this is the conclusion. I'm not reproducing the body, it will take a lot of time. Well, we can't say with 100% certainty that the mythical Saraswati river exactly matches with the one described in the Vedic texts. There is strong geological and archaeological evidence that a significant river once flowed in the region, likely inspiring the stories. So yes, a river that could be identified as Saraswati very likely did exist in the ancient times. So ChatGPT agrees with you, sir.
Thank you for that recognition.
No, jokes apart, that is not to cross verify or do something this thing, but to weave a very interesting story around Indus Valley and connecting it to Keeladi requires two qualities. One, of course, thoroughness of the subject, the box which he very comfortably ticks. But the second box which he really ticks was to bring it down to a level that it commands so much of interest with all age groups, particularly students. I think hats off to the way he presented it to all of us. And I would request that Mr. Chandramouli and all of us have a follow-on series to dive deep into the connection aspect of Indus Valley and Keeladi, with more documentary evidence as it flows along. But thank you, sir, for a wonderful session, very enjoyable. And the best testimony of the success of this particular event is that the hall is overflowing with people sitting on the floor on various types of chairs, and really augurs well for the future of CAC. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let me just add to that. I think despite the non-functioning AC, all of you have been listening with such rapt attention. I think that is the power of the speaker today. So a big round of applause. Next week, we have another session that is on different genre. It is on conservation. So land use is what we are going to talk about. And after that, there will be a session on cricket, which is a book by Sri Bharat Raman on the Chennai Super Kings. So see you all again next week and the week after that. We'll be keeping you informed about the events. Thank you.